The ballroom was the kind of place that made ordinary people feel small. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Men in tailored suits spoke in low voices. Women with perfect posture sipped champagne and smiled at each other without warmth. Everything about the room said power. Everything about the room said money. Anna walked in and owned it. She wore a deep burgundy gown that swept the floor with every step. Her hair was pinned back in an elegant twist, a few curls left loose to frame her face. Her skin glowed warm and rich under the golden lights, and her eyes carried a quiet fire that made people look twice. She wasn't loud. She didn't have to be. The room felt her presence before anyone could explain why. Beside her walked a man the whole room already knew. Ben, tall, calm, and precise in a dark suit that fit like it had been made for him alone. He didn't smile often, but when his gaze swept the room, people straightened without being told to. He placed a slow, deliberate hand on the small of Anna's back, and from somewhere across the room, a glass nearly slipped from a man's fingers. Dylan stood frozen near the bar. His jaw tightened. His eyes locked on Anna like he was seeing a ghost. The woman before him was impossible. This couldn't be the same person he had left behind. But it was. And every step she took made it more painful to watch. Dylan couldn't stop staring. He watched Anna move through the crowd like she had been born inside this world. People turned to greet her. Men leaned in when she spoke. Women studied her dress with eyes that wanted to copy it. She laughed at something, and the sound seemed to carry across the entire room without effort. Beside her, Ben said nothing for long stretches of time. He didn't need to. He only had to stand there, and the space around them became untouchable. Dylan had heard the name before tonight. Ben was not just wealthy. He was the kind of man whose business went beyond boardrooms and contracts. The kind of man people only crossed once. Dylan tightened his grip on his glass. How? The question beat inside his chest over and over. How did this happen? When he had last seen Anna, she was barely holding herself together. She had been exhausted, quiet, fading. She had begged him to stay. She had cried in their kitchen with her hands pressed to her mouth so the neighbors wouldn't hear. He had walked out anyway. He had told himself she was dragging him down, that she was too emotional, too slow for the life he was building. Now she stood across the room in a $4,000 gown beside a man who made Dylan feel like a boy pretending to be important. Regret is a strange thing. It arrives too late and stays too long. Dylan set down his glass before his hands could shake. The night moved forward, but Dylan's feet would not. He watched Ben lean down and say something close to Anna's ear. She tilted her head and smiled. Not a polite smile, the real kind, the kind that reached her eyes and stayed. Dylan remembered when she used to smile at him like that. He had stopped noticing it somewhere along the way. Now he would have given anything to earn it back. A man in a gray suit approached Ben with a cautious handshake. Then another. Then a woman with silver earrings who spoke quickly and nodded too many times. Ben answered each of them in a few short words, never moving far from Anna's side. It was clear that being close to him meant something, and Anna stood within that circle without looking uncomfortable. She looked like she belonged there. She looked like she had always belonged there. Dylan thought about the last real conversation they'd had. It hadn't been a conversation at all. He had told her they were done, said she was holding him back, said he needed someone who matched his level. He had said it in the middle of the afternoon, with his keys already in his hand, like he had somewhere more important to be. Anna had not screamed. She had not broken plates. She had only looked at him for a long moment, like she was memorizing his face. He hadn't understood that look then. He understood it now. She had been saying goodbye to someone she had already outgrown. 18 months earlier, Anna's morning started before the sun. She would wake at 5:30, pull herself out of bed in the dark, and start getting ready for a job she was grateful for but tired of. She worked as an administrator at a mid-sized logistics company in the city. The pay was decent. The hours were long. She handled more than her title said she should, covered gaps that her supervisors pretended not to see, and smiled through all of it, because that was what Anna did. At home, she carried another job entirely. Dylan was 3 years into building his own event planning business. It had promise, real promise, the kind that Anna had believed in from the very beginning. She had helped him design his first pitch deck. She had sat beside him at midnight editing proposals. She had transferred money to his business account twice when cash flow got tight, money she had saved slowly over years of careful spending. She had done it all willingly, lovingly even, because she believed in him, because she thought love meant showing up even when it was inconvenient. She thought love meant sacrifice. What she didn't see yet was that sacrifice without appreciation is not love. It is loss wearing love's clothing. Dylan took what she gave and kept asking for more. Not cruelly at first, just consistently. And Anna kept saying yes because each time she said yes, he called her his rock, his foundation, the reason he kept going. She lived for those words. She didn't yet know how much they were costing her. The first time Dylan introduced Sujin, he called her a business contact. Anna had smiled and shaken her hand. Sujin was the daughter of a well-connected Korean investor named Mr. Park, and she had approached Dylan at a networking event about potentially funding his growing business. She was polished, sharp, and precise in the way that made every room feel like her territory. She wore suits that were fitted without being flashy. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, people wrote things down. Dylan came home buzzing that night. Anna made him tea and listened to every word, nodding along, asking the right questions, feeling genuinely happy for him. She thought this was it, the breakthrough he'd worked so hard for. But something small nagged at her. The way Dylan had described Sujin, the careful way he hadn't said too much, the brightness in his eyes that seemed less like business excitement and more like something else she couldn't quite name. She pushed the feeling down. She told herself she was being insecure. Dylan had worked hard for this. She would not make a success about her anxieties. So she ironed his shirt for his first meeting with Mr. Park's team. She helped him rehearse his pitch at the kitchen table until midnight. She watched him drive away the next morning, looking confident and ready, and she felt proud. She still thought they were a team. She still thought what she did mattered to him. The comments started quietly, the way a slow leak starts before a flood. "You've been eating a lot lately." Dylan said it with a casual shrug, eyes on his phone. Anna had been cutting a piece of cake. Her hand paused. She put the fork down without finishing the slice. "I'm just saying, we both want to be healthier," he added, not looking up. She said nothing. She threw the rest of the cake away that evening. 2 weeks later, he mentioned her wardrobe. Not harshly, just a suggestion, framed as care. The people were trying to impress at these events. They noticed things. Image is branding. He had smiled when he said it, like he was doing her a favor. Anna spent a Saturday afternoon going through her wardrobe, removing pieces she had always loved, replacing them with what she thought he meant. She spent money she hadn't planned to spend. Then it was her career. "You're smart, babe, but you're not exactly climbing. My investors' partners are all directors, VPs, founders. It's a bit embarrassing when they ask what you do." She had stared at the table when he said that. She didn't argue. She didn't cry in front of him. She smiled tightly and said she understood. But alone in the bathroom that night, she gripped the sink and looked at her own reflection for a long time. She was becoming smaller and smaller, and she hadn't even noticed when it started. Mr. Park's funding came through in late spring. Dylan's business jumped overnight. Contracts, partnerships, high-end corporate clients. His calendar filled with events that were photographed and posted and admired. His name started appearing in places that had never carried it before. Anna watched it all happen and told herself it was what she had always wanted for him. But Dylan's schedule changed completely. Evenings that used to be theirs disappeared. Weekends became work trips she wasn't invited on. Phone calls got shorter. Explanations got thinner. And Sujin's name appeared more and more in his stories, always just in passing, always framed as business, but present in a way that accumulated over time like a quiet pressure in a sealed room. Anna started waiting. She would have dinner ready at 7 and eat it alone by 8. She would fall asleep with the television on and wake to the sound of the front door clicking shut past midnight. She would ask soft questions and receive vague answers. And she would tell herself she was imagining things, that she was not enough, that she should be more patient. She started writing in a journal at night, things she couldn't say out loud, feelings she wasn't sure she had the right to feel, doubts that felt disloyal but would not leave. She still believed in them. She still made 2 cups of coffee every morning, even when she always ended up drinking both alone. Love, she had been taught, was supposed to be enough. She was beginning to wonder if she had been taught wrong. It ended on a Thursday afternoon in October. Anna had taken a half day from work because she hadn't been sleeping well. She came home expecting an empty apartment, planning to make soup and rest. Instead, Dylan was there, sitting at the kitchen table with his bag already packed. She stopped at the door. He looked up. He didn't look guilty. He looked tired in the way a person looks tired when they've been carrying a decision for a long time and are finally about to put it down. "We need to talk," he said, but his voice was flat and already decided. She set her keys on the counter. She sat down across from him. She folded her hands because she needed to hold on to something. He told her they had grown in different directions. He told her she was a good person. He told her he needed someone who matched where he was going. He said it carefully, like he had rehearsed it, which he probably had. Every sentence was clean and final and designed not to be argued with. "Is there someone else?" she asked. He paused for a half second too long. "This isn't about anyone else. This is about us." She looked at him, really looked at him, and she understood that the half second had answered her question more honestly than anything else he'd said. She did not scream. She did not beg. She only nodded slowly once. She waited until he was gone before she let herself fall apart. The weeks after Dylan left were the quietest Anna had ever known. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The hollow kind that fills a space where someone used to be and makes every ordinary sound feel like an echo. She went to work. She came home. She ate simple food she did not taste. She replied to messages in short words and told people she was fine in a voice that came out too flat to believe. Her friend Nadia called every few days, and Anna answered sometimes and let it go to voicemail the rest of the time. She wasn't ready for people yet. She slept a lot, not because she was rested, but because sleep was the only place where she didn't have to feel the exact shape of what she had lost. And what she had lost was not only Dylan. She had lost the version of herself who had believed so completely in someone else that she had quietly stopped believing in herself. His voice was still in her head. "You're not ambitious enough. Image is branding. I need someone who matches where I'm going." She would hear the words in the middle of making coffee, standing in the shower, waiting for the bus. They were small and sharp, and they found every tender place without trying. She thought about calling him twice. She didn't. Something small and stubborn at the center of her said no. She couldn't explain that quiet refusal. She didn't have a name for it yet, but it was the first sign that something inside her was still alive. 3 months passed. Anna paid her rent, fed herself, and kept her job. On the outside, she was holding together. On the inside, she was still carrying the weight of everything Dylan had said to her, and beneath that, the heavier weight of how long she had accepted it. It was Nadia who finally pulled her out. Nadia had been her friend since secondary school. She was direct in a way that wasn't always comfortable, but was always honest. She came over on a Saturday with food, no warning, and sat down at Anna's table like she owned the place. "You've been disappearing," Nadia said, unpacking jollof rice and fried plantain from paper bag. "And I'm not going to pretend I haven't noticed." Anna sat down and looked at the food and felt her throat tighten. "He made me feel like I was the problem," Anna said quietly. "He was a man who needed someone beneath him to feel tall," Nadia said. "That is not your fault. That is his limitation." They ate. They talked. Really talked. The way they used to when they were young, and everything felt like it still had room to change. That night, Anna dug out her old notebook and wrote one sentence at the top of a clean page. "I'm going to find out who I am without someone else's voice in my head." She did not know what that would look like. She did not have a plan, but the words felt like a door opening. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday in November. Anna was sitting at her desk at work when she received an email about a training program for mid-level operations managers. It was a 6-month professional development course, fully funded by her company, and her supervisor had quietly forwarded it with a note that said, "I think you'd be perfect for this." She stared at the email for a long time. Then she opened Instagram instead, which she told herself she had stopped doing, and in 3 minutes, she found exactly what she had been afraid of finding. Dylan, at a rooftop event, looking polished and comfortable, his arm loosely around a woman in a white dress. Sujin. The caption said something about partnerships and new chapters. She stared at that photo for too long. Then she closed the app, closed her email, picked up her bag, walked to the office bathroom, ran cold water over her wrists, and breathed until she stopped shaking. She stood at that mirror for 5 minutes. And then something broke open inside her. Not in the way things break when they are destroyed. In the way things break when they have been held under pressure for too long and could finally release. She was tired of waiting to feel better. She was tired of letting other people define how much space she was allowed to take up. She walked back to her desk, opened the email, and replied in 4 words. I would like to apply. That was the beginning. Anna disappeared. Not physically. She still went to work, still answered messages, still existed inside her daily life. But she disappeared in the way that matters. She stopped showing up in spaces where she had been showing up out of habit or fear or the need to be seen. She stopped checking Dylan's social media. She stopped replaying conversations. She stopped performing fine for people who didn't actually want the real answer. Instead, she poured everything she had into the training program. It was harder than she had expected. The material was dense. The other participants were sharp. There were moments in those first weeks when the old voice in her head, the one that sounded like Dylan but had started in her long before him, told her she was not built for this level. She kept going anyway. Her supervisor, a quiet, precise woman named Mrs. Osei, noticed a shift in her work almost immediately. She pulled Anna aside after a team meeting and said, "Whatever you're doing, it's working. You're sharper than you've ever been." Anna took those words and kept them carefully like something valuable. She started running in the mornings. Not for weight, not for any particular goal, just for the feeling of her own feet on the ground and air filling her lungs. Just to feel like her body belonged to her. She cooked food she actually liked. She called her mother more. She sat with her feelings instead of pushing them down. Piece by piece, quietly, she put herself back together. This time, she decided what the pieces would look like. She met Ben on a Wednesday afternoon when her umbrella broke on a rainy street. She was coming out of a training session, running 15 minutes late for a meeting across town, umbrella folded uselessly in her hands, rain soaking through her jacket. She ducked into the covered entrance of an office building and stood there calculating how long she could afford to wait. A man appeared beside her a few moments later. Tall, calm, holding an intact umbrella in one hand. He glanced at her broken one without a word, then held his umbrella out toward her. "I have a car," he said. "You need it more than I do." She almost declined out of reflex. Old Anna would have said, "No, thank you. I'm fine," and stood in the rain to prove she didn't need help. New Anna looked at the umbrella, looked at the sky, and said, "Thank you." She found out his name when she tried to return the umbrella 2 days later. She had found a business card in the handle, probably tucked there for exactly this reason. Ben, a single name on clean cream cardstock with a phone number. She texted to arrange the return. He replied quickly, suggested coffee. She thought about it for exactly 2 days before saying yes. Coffee turned into a walk. The walk turned into dinner. Dinner turned into another dinner, and then another, and somewhere in those evenings she realized that Ben listened the way people listen when they actually intend to remember what you say. That was rarer than she had ever appreciated. 3 weeks in, Ben told her the truth about who he was. They were sitting at a quiet table in a restaurant she had never been to before, the kind of place with no visible menu and food that arrived without being ordered. She had been comfortable, more comfortable than she expected to be. And then he set down his glass and looked at her with steady eyes. "I want to tell you something," he said, "before this goes further." She placed her hands in her lap. He told her simply and without dramatizing it. His family had deep ties to a Korean organization that operated outside the boundaries of the law. Protection, influence, enforcement. His father had built it, Ben now ran it. He had legitimate businesses, many of them, and he was slowly working to move the whole operation toward cleaner ground. But he wanted her to know the full picture. He didn't want to build something on half-truths. Anna listened without looking away. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I don't want you to find out from someone else," he said. and because I think you deserve to make an informed decision." That was not what she had expected him to say. She asked him 2 questions. Did he hurt innocent people? Did he believe what he did was right? He answered both honestly. The answers were complicated. She respected that more than simple ones would have been. She said she needed time to think. She took 4 days. Then she called him. What grew between them was not fast. It was not a rush of feeling that swept away everything before it. It was slow and deliberate and built on a foundation of honesty that Anna had not known was possible in the relationships she had experienced before. Ben was not easy. He was guarded in certain ways, and he had seen enough of the world to have hard edges where softer people had none. He kept his emotions close, not because he was cold, but because he had learned that showing everything was a form of vulnerability he could only afford with people he truly trusted. Anna understood that. She was still learning the same lesson herself. He respected her work in a way that felt different from compliments. He asked specific questions about her projects. He remembered details she mentioned in passing. When she was promoted to operations manager after completing her training program, he took her to dinner and sat across from her with something in his eyes that looked like genuine pride. "You did that," he said. "You earned that." She had heard those words before from other people, but they had usually been followed by something that needed something from her. Ben's version had no follow-up request. He just meant it. She started to trust him, not recklessly, but carefully, the way you test a bridge before you cross it. She was no longer the woman who gave everything away freely. She was someone who chose, deliberately and clearly, what she would share and with whom. That change had cost her, but had made her unbreakable. 6 months after they met, Anna's life had rearranged itself into something she did not fully recognize, but had begun to feel at home inside. She had been promoted again. Mrs. Osei had pushed her name for a regional director role, and after 2 rounds of interviews, she had gotten it. She managed a team of 12 people now. She sat in rooms where strategy was discussed, where her opinion was sought and followed. She had stopped being surprised when people listened to her. Ben had quietly become a constant presence. Not intrusive, just steady. He would appear at the end of a difficult week with food and the ability to say nothing if nothing was needed. He had a stillness that Anna had at first mistaken for coldness, but she now understood as strength. He did not panic. He did not spiral. He handled things. She had started to handle things too, in a new way, not by absorbing pressure until she broke, but by meeting it directly. She thought about Dylan sometimes, less often than she once had, and when she did think of him, it was without the familiar ache. It was more like looking back at a road you once walked and realizing how far you had come from that particular junction. She was not who she had been when he left. That woman was real, and she had loved genuinely. But she was gone. What remained was something quieter and stronger, something that no one had built for her, something she had built herself in the long months of silence when no one was watching. The invitation arrived on a Friday. It was from a high-profile industry gala, the kind of event that gathered the top names in business, development, and investment from across the city. Ben's name appeared on the hosting committee. Anna was listed as his guest, though Ben had asked her genuinely whether she wanted to attend. He did not pressure. He simply opened the door and waited. She almost said no, not because she was afraid of the event, but because Nadia had mentioned in passing, almost too carefully, that Dylan's event management company was one of the corporate sponsors. He would likely be there. Anna sat with that information for 3 days. She thought about what it would feel like to walk into the same room as him. The old version of herself would have restructured her entire life to avoid that discomfort. She would have declined, stayed home, convinced herself it didn't matter, and then spent the whole evening wondering. But the woman she had become looked at that thought from a different angle entirely. She was not going to the gala because of Dylan. She was not going to prove anything to him or punish him or watch his face fall. She was going because it was her world now as much as anyone's. She had earned her place at that table through work and growth and choices that had nothing to do with him. She called Ben on Sunday evening. "I'll go," she said. "Good," he said. "I'll have a car pick you up at 7. She smiled and hung up. Then she went to find a dress. The night of the gala arrived cool and clear. Anna stood in front of her mirror in the burgundy gown and looked at the woman looking back at her. She was not looking for flaws. She was not adjusting herself to match someone else's standard. She was simply looking honestly and steadily at who she had become. She recognized her. Ben arrived at 7 exactly. He stood at the door in a black suit that made him look like a man who decided how rooms felt. He looked at her in a way that did not need words, the kind of look that tells you clearly you are seen, fully, exactly as you are. They arrived at the gala to the low sound of a jazz quartet and the warm glow of light through high windows. Anna moved through the entrance with her head up, her hand light on Ben's arm, feeling the room without being swallowed by it. She greeted people Ben introduced her to and held her own in every conversation. A woman in emerald asked about her work in regional operations. A man in silver cufflinks asked her opinion on a business restructuring problem his firm was facing. She gave a real answer. He took out his phone to write it down. Then at the far side of the room, near the bar, she saw him. Dylan. He looked polished and successful and entirely unprepared for what he was seeing. Anna held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she turned back to her conversation and kept talking. She did not feel shaken. She felt the cleanest kind of calm. He found her during the second hour, when Ben had stepped away briefly. Anna was standing near the tall windows, her champagne glass light in her hand, looking at the city lights below. She heard his footsteps before she saw him, and she did not turn immediately. Anna, Dylan said. She turned slowly. He looked older in person than he did in photographs, and she thought with a kind of sad clarity that he had been working very hard to look like he had everything, and it showed. Dylan, she said. He looked at her for a long moment with an expression that had too many things in it: regret, disbelief, something almost like grief. You look incredible. She nodded once. Thank you. The silence stretched. He filled it with words that came out slightly too fast. He told her she had been on his mind. He told her he knew he had made a mistake. He said the relationship with Sue Jean was complicated and not what it had seemed. He said he should have seen her value. He said it with the conviction of someone who believed it was still worth saying. Anna listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, calmly and without cruelty, "You didn't lose me because of someone else, Dylan. You lost me when you made me believe my worth was something that had to be earned. When you made me feel like I was too much and not enough at the same time." He opened his mouth. She continued, her voice still soft. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." And she meant it. Ben appeared at her side a few minutes after Dylan walked away. He did not ask what had been said. He simply stood beside her, looked out at the city, and handed her a fresh glass of champagne. She accepted it, and they stood together in easy quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said eventually. "Better than okay," she said. And she meant that too. On the drive home, Anna watched the city lights move past the window and thought about the woman she had been the last time she had seen Dylan. The one who had eaten dinner alone, cried in bathrooms, and apologized for things that were not her fault. That woman had been real. She had been full of love and effort and genuine care. She deserved to be remembered honestly, not dismissed or forgotten. But she was gone. She had been rebuilt into something new, not because someone better had come along, but because Anna had decided, one quiet morning at a time, that she was worth rebuilding. Ben took her hand in the dark of the car. She laced her fingers through his and did not pull away. There was no grand moment that completed her story. No single sentence that tied everything together. Life was not a speech or a lesson or a perfectly constructed final scene. It was just this: two people in a warm car on a clear night, moving forward. Anna had come into her own through loss and silence and the long, private work of becoming herself. She had not arrived. She was still becoming. But she was finally doing it on her own terms. And that, she had learned, was everything. This wasn't a revenge story. This was a reminder. You don't glow up to prove anything to the person who left. You glow up so you never settle like that again. If that message hit you, you're exactly where you need to be. Backhand index pointing down comment, I choose me. If you're on your own glow up journey. Thumbs up like this video to support more stories like this. Bell and subscribe, because this channel is built for people who are becoming unstoppable.